Hello everyone, your friendly neighborhood demonic Ravenwolf, October, is back with another interesting topic. I am with my friend, Alex, who will also share his opinion about the documentary.
Thanks, October. When it comes to fandoms, any fandom, there'll be bad apples. These applies across the board. Movies, TV shows, cartoons, anime, video games, music, celebrities, you name it. Every corner of pop culture has a toxic side. A bundle of drama and ignorance that stains the enjoyment for everyone else. Take, for example, Rick and Morty. Some fans gatekeep by claiming you need a high IQ to understand the show. And let's not forget the iconic Szechuan sauce riot. And, of course, let's not forget Star Wars. Don't get me started with that because the fans are toxic as hell to the point they will actually crowdfund campaigns to remake The Last Jedi because it was that terrible. Oh, and if you want more entitlement, look at Snyderverse fans who claim they want Henry Cavill back as that god-figure Superman rather than that country boy Scout who would actually have a beard because he's actually goddamn nice. Oh, and if you want some gaming toxicity, look at Assassin's Creed Shadow, where some fans claim that Yosuke shouldn't be a black samurai, where in some documents of Japan's history, there is a claim that Yosuke is black, and whether he's a samurai is up for discussion against historians, but the main course is that he's black. Of course, throughout the entire fandom, any fandom to be precise, there was always being pornographic imagery. It doesn't matter. But what tops all this toxicity is that every single fan would send a death threat to the creators and the actors for the smallest, pettiest disagreement. The furry fandom isn't immune to this, but what sets it apart is how often it's used as a scapegoat, particularly by right-wing media and culture warriors. When they need an easy target, they don't care to understand us or the context. They don't want solutions. They just want something to demonize. They'll point fingers and stir up outdated controversies that most of us moved on from decades ago. Why? It's convenient. Because it fuels outrage and garners clicks. Let's be clear. Yes, the furry community, like any other, has its share of controversies, including the serious ones like allegations of abuse of any kind. Those issues do matter and deserve accountability. But the entire fandom should not be defined by the worst actions of a few individuals. I say this not only as someone who's writing a book about my persona, but also as someone who in film school graduated and recommended Sound of Freedom for an entire class because I believe in confronting real issues with nuance, not propaganda and lazy narratives. These smear campaigns are about justice or truth. They're about easy rage bait. Furry hate is low-hanging fruit. It's unoriginal, intellectually lazy, and designed purely to incite, not inform. If you want a real thoughtful perspective on the furry community, I highly recommend the documentary The Fandom by Coyote. It's an award-winning film that traces its roots of the furry fandom back to the 1970s, featuring anime lovers who brought Japanese culture to the West, Disney animators who risked their careers, and sci-fi enthusiasts who organized the first furry community. It also explains how the LGBT community became a safe haven for the furry community. And it shows the economic force of this fandom throughout the entire US and maybe some parts of the world. And I met Coyote. My friends met them. My friends met Coyote. She's beautiful. She's very kind. I would say that she's possibly the only furry that would represent the entirety of the fandom. I feel like I gave her more weight on her shoulders by saying that, but what can I say? She's amazing. I love her content. This furry detective does nothing but cast bait into the waters of the public opinion, hoping to catch a quick outrage. And seriously, my OC is a better furry detective than this piece of shit. Anyway, back to you, October.
Thank you for bringing that up, Alex. A lot of other communities and a lot of other fandoms can become very toxic environments. And they certainly have their plethora of bad apples. The crazy thing is, I think a lot of these other communities and fandoms have scandals that are even less known about than the ones that are going to be featured in this documentary. So why aren't they getting a true crime documentary made about them? The whole point of this documentary is to get to the quote-unquote underbelly of the furry fandom. Ooh. But in actuality, it's just really dredging up old information that anybody can look up. In fact, there are many YouTube videos that have been made by both furs and non-furs alike about the very thing that this documentary is going to discuss. This documentary does not just bring up old things that are very well established in the furry fandom, that have been made public for more than a decade, but terribly, the trailer alone uses footage of fursuiters who did not consent to be in the documentary, which is certainly not good, and we will get into it. We are also going to go over the trailer today to see if it has any redeeming qualities about it, or if it just comes off as another piece of cringe culture that non-furs are just going to point at. The series, and yes, it is a series for some reason, is produced by the Sundance TV channel, which is owned by AMC, who have produced other overly dramatic true crime documentaries for streaming. To be honest, I don't know how to feel about the whole true crime documentary craze. I have noticed that there has been this growing trend lately to make these documentaries as suspenseful and dramatic as possible. When looking at the snippets of this trailer, it doesn't really look any different than any other true crime documentary that this studio has produced or that other people have produced. Except this particular documentary might have the extra benefit of throwing an entire community under the bus, just for shock value.
When you have evidence of some serious crime happening,
either you're going to do something about it or you're part of the problem.
People involved in this story are
furries.
So, the first few minutes, we get the big reveal of the people who were involved. Furries! But the way that it is edited is particularly confusing because it makes it look like that the furries themselves are implicated in a crime. So, the entire premise of the show, from what I understand, is supposed to be about how the furry community came together and helped solve a crime. However, literally in the first few minutes, you are literally implicating the concept of what furry is and associating that with crime by showing all these different furries in the first few minutes from the perspective of somebody who does not know who these people are. You might not be aware of who committed the crime. Now, I am aware of who committed the crime because I am actually in the fandom, but somebody outside of the fandom might not know that, and would probably assume that they all were involved in the crime. This does not just implicate a few bad actors, as some defenders of this documentary have claimed, but this first few minutes implicates the whole fandom. You might be wondering, why do the first few minutes matter? Well, for somebody outside of the furry fandom who might not be interested in the show, they would have scrolled away at this point, but not after associating furry with crime, which is what the first few minutes of this documentary intentionally or unintentionally does. Also, did they just give Kuro screen time there? This is already off to a really bad start.
What is a furry? Someone who enjoys anthropomorphic creatures.
Hey!
It's fun and loving and diverse.
You will be accepted.
So I like the answer they give to the question, what is a furry? And instead of saying the usual crud, like it's someone who identifies as an animal, which is completely false, they say it's someone who enjoys anthropomorphic creatures. This is a pretty good definition if you just want a baseline understanding of what it is about. They go on to say that it is fun-loving and diverse, which I'm not going to lie is a really good way to describe the fandom. Unfortunately, however, they followed it up with this line.
They don't care if you identify as a pineapple.
This completely mucks up the positive elements you were describing earlier. For the person who is not in the fandom, who I believe is going to be the majority of the audience for this "they do not care" line might be taken the wrong way. A person outside of the fandom might think, well, obviously they do not care enough to keep crime out of their community, or else they wouldn't be in a crime documentary. Also, I'm gonna say this, having the lines identifying as a pineapple comes off as a little bit transphobic. Now, I don't blame the person for saying this, because I think what they're saying is being taken out of context. However, I do think that the editor of this trailer should have known better. I do think that the editor of this trailer just put this in here just for shock value. It's a very lowball way to try and get your audience to watch the show. It's just pathetic. I don't know what else to say. This scene here has caused the most amount of outrage, or at the very least the second amount of outrage, from people who had no idea and had no consent to be shown in this documentary. Because of this, I have decided to intentionally blur out this scene, or other scenes like it, to show a little bit of respect for those who did not choose to be in this. From what I'm able to gather, what happened with this scene is that they recycled footage from San Francisco Pride Parade. Seriously, imagine that you make the conscious effort to get out there to support a community that is being heavily marginalized and stigmatized right now, and then your likeness gets put in some true crime documentary you had no idea existed a few weeks ago. It's just not right, and everybody who chose not to be in this has every reason to be upset. There's even somebody in the clip who was not wearing a mask or face covering. So now their identity can further be identified by friends, family, or random strangers who may not like them, or could be violent towards them.
There are people who would never harm animals.
One day, I got a call. We have a problem in the community.
There were these postings of videos and pictures with living and deceased animals.
There were people so twisted.
And they are hiding in plain sight.
They go on to say that furries never harmed animals, which I believe is a very true statement. In fact, during conventions, there are charities that come in to collect donations for animal charities that try to prevent animal abuse. However, once again, this positive sentiment gets destroyed and muddied when immediately after this, you have a police officer talking about receiving dead animal photos. Then immediately following that by having somebody say crazy and twisted. And then finally, the coup de grace of all of this, an elderly woman saying that they were hiding in plain sight. These constant negating statements after a positive statement are not painting the fandom in a positive light. In fact, the final line kind of sows the seeds of paranoia against the fandom by saying that these people can hide in plain sight.
It's time that the furry fandom take a stand.
We nicknamed ourselves the Furvengers. First, let's get these guys.
So finally, at the minute and 20-second mark of the trailer, we get a resemblance of what this is supposed to be about, which, from what I understand, is a bunch of online furs who helped expose people who were abusing animals. Although this is fine, I just wish it would have been said sooner, like at the beginning of the trailer. Instead, we kind of had to wade through a bunch of muck in order to get to this positive viewpoint. Although brief, we do get another shot, this time close up, of the fursuiters at the parade. Once again, they have every right to complain because they did not consent to being in this documentary. They were there to support the LGBTQ+ community they believe in, not this schlock.
Try to prove that I'm guilty, go ahead, because there's nothing there.
He's been lying this whole time.
This was a global operation.
So, as I thought, Kuro is trying to claim his innocence. What a shock. I know this is a documentary and they want to cover all sides, but giving this guy screen time is not a good idea. The furry community wants to be done with this guy, me included. Giving him a platform, especially one as big as this streaming service that can be seen by people outside of the fandom, is not going to paint the fandom in the best light. Even if the documentary takes this neutral position with Curran's testimony, my fear is even this most neutral amount of exposure may cause his supporters to try and legitimize his innocence even further. We have seen this before in other true crime documentaries. A perfect example of this would be Joe Exotic in the true crime documentary, The Tiger King. Even though the documentary not only showed him abusing the animals he supposedly took well care of, but they also made it abundantly clear that he was harassing his own staff and he paid a hitman to kill one of his rivals. Even with all of this in the documentary showing him to be this terrible, deceitful person, there is still tons of people now trying to petition for his release from prison, simply because of the popularity of this true crime series. So imagine if Curran got the same popularity and support. Do you think that this documentary would still be good for the fandom? For this next part, I decided to blur out this scene here because it depicts a rifle shooting out of nowhere. Some people might think it is a little bit strange of me to blur out this scene, but at the same time, I know that there are a ton of people who have been marginalized or know somebody who has been marginalized in acts of violence at the end of a firearm. So out of respect for people in the community, I have decided to not show this.
I had just kicked a wasp's nest.
You felt like you were kind of opening Pandora's box and you didn't know what was going to shake out.
I guess what true crime documentary wouldn't be complete with some random person firing a gun? I'm sure that's not going to be triggering or troubling for anybody, especially if you support a community that has been through multiple mass shootings. So for the final scenes of the trailer, we have this random fursuiter standing outside somebody's home in the middle of the night, looking very menacingly. After this scene, we then quickly cut to a police officer saying, "We opened a Pandora's box and didn't know what was going to shake out." Just when you thought that this trailer wouldn't associate furries with crime any further, they then show a bunch of skulls and police tape as well as forensic teams taking photographs. This trailer, rather than associating furries with the good guys and solving crimes, it more or less associates the furry fandom with crimes as the way the trailer is edited. The information that they are going to show in this documentary is over a decade old. We have seen it and we have examined it as a community and learned what caused these mistakes so we can become a better fandom in the future. Unfortunately, now with this documentary, it's like we scaled a summit of a mountain to retrieve a flag, only to find out upon reaching the summit, the flag had been moved to a different mountaintop, and now we have to begin the arduous journey once again. The question now arises, what can we do in this situation? Well, there are in fact some things that we can absolutely do. Number one, we can make sure that people's likenesses are not used without their consent. We can do this by contacting the San Francisco Pride Parade email address. which I will put in the description below. Now, I don't want people harassing the Pride Parade staff. I think we should simply tell them what is occurring and how this has affected other people in our community. To be honest, I don't know if this will amount to much. However, this public email address from the staff from the parade have allowed us to use our voice. So let us use it in a respectful manner. Number 2. This is something I noticed in the responses to people who said they did not approve to be in the documentary. There were comments from people who said there was no legal thing you could do about it, or the Pride Parade was a public event and they should have known better. I don't know if these comments that were in response to people who were saying that they did not approve to be in this documentary were meant to be patronizing. Sometimes you can't really tell what somebody's intentions are when they're typing in a comments section. Intentional or not, these comments do come off as being very patronizing and being very dismissive of people's feelings and complaints about this documentary, which I'm going to say once again, they did not consent to being in. If these people's likenesses are being used in a way that makes them uncomfortable, they have every right to complain and be asked to be removed. And I'm no expert on the law myself, but I don't think anybody leaving these comments are experts on the law either. What we need to do is be supportive and respectful to those whose likenesses have been used without their consent in this documentary, which has made them very uncomfortable. Number 3. This is a very simple one. Simply do not watch the series. Do not even hate watch it. And if somebody brings it up, regard it the same way that you would regard the CSI episode, with the same disdain and disgust. If you are indeed interested in this story, there are tons of YouTube videos about this very topic. Clappé des Cils had an excellent video that definitely broke down the evidence that showed how Curran definitely did these crimes. In the same video, he also showed how the mass media can depict furries and how that can affect how people see the fandom through different stereotypes. There are also many other furry YouTubers who do this kind of thing and warn against bad actors. 2 other great YouTubers that do this are Misha B. Barkin and LagoVirt. Definitely give them your support. At the very least, you'll be supporting an independent creator rather than a major network who, let's face it, is really doing all this to get attention and a check.
Thanks, October, for having me over. And you can follow me on TikTok with Ethereum Monster Journal.
Link will be in the description below if you want to check any of his content out. Highly recommend it. Like at the end of all my videos, what are your thoughts on this? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe, and I'll be seeing you soon. Hey, if you enjoy our content, maybe you would like to help us support our channel. Every little bit helps. I would also like to give a special shout out to the amazing artist who did the extraordinary character stills we used in this video. The ever incredible Bleptarts. Definitely check out their artwork if you get the chance. Also, if you're interested in the flittering thoughts that go upon in my brain, consider following us on Blue Sky. And thank you once again for your support.